don't forget to celebrate, right? And say, hey, good job.
So how do we go from report cards are a big deal to, oh, this is just part of your journey?
And if we know that nobody is perfect, we are all a work in progress.
What I want for you is that you're happy, as opposed to what I need from you is to perform. Being a parent is a high calling, and it's deeply rewarding. I'm your host, Natalie Mann. I'm a mom of 6, so I know firsthand that being a parent has its challenges, and we really need each other on this journey. Welcome to Rooted Parenting. I'm here to help you to honor God as a parent and to raise your kids to know and to love Jesus. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about report cards and how we can use them to help our children. My guest is Esther McIntyre. Esther is a teacher here at SPH. She's also the middle years program coordinator for our middle years grades. And I'm so delighted to have Esther here on the show. So Esther, welcome to the show. Glad you could join us.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering if you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am a mother of 3 children. I have 3 children who've all gone through SPH. So 2 are alumni, 2 boys. So one has just finished college and he just moved a few days ago to Melbourne. My second son, Dominic, is about to start university. In fact, he will be going into his dormitory this Sunday. And I only have one child left, my baby girl, Eliana, who's grade 11.
Yeah.
And we've been here in Indonesia going on to 17 years, but this is 8 years for me as an educator and a privilege to join SPH in the vision and mission for our children.
Yeah, awesome. And it's really good to have someone who's a parent and an educator to talk about this topic, because I feel like when report cards roll around, we really want to think carefully about our role as parents and how we can be an encouragement to our kids when it can be a stressful season. So I think back to when my kids were young, and in particular, it was probably one of the first report cards that I read for my oldest son. Probably he was in grade 1, because I think in kindergarten you don't get, too much feedback. But I do remember, the mom instinct. I scanned the report card. Everything looks pretty good. And then there was one thing that looked like, it's just a little off. And it wasn't a big deal, but I think he got a B in music and everything else was an A. And as a mom, and also as a mom who loves music and who had put Lucas in, violin lessons from the time he was 3 years old, I kind of read it and thought, wait a minute, that's kind of weird. And I definitely zoned in on that one area of weakness, and I started to feel even kind of stressed about it. I remember looking back thinking, what do I do? Now what do I do, And I remember talking to my husband, who said, you do nothing. It doesn't matter. But still, internally, I felt like, well, I wonder if I need to speak to the teacher and understand maybe there's something going on. And in time, I think I managed to have just a casual conversation with the teacher, and she assured me that she liked to start all the kids with a B, and then they would see progress and get an A at the end. And I thought, okay. But actually, when I look back, I feel like that was probably one of my first errors looking at a report card, was that I kind of failed to really celebrate or emphasize or even think about the fact that Lucas was doing very, very well. But in my mind, that B represented, oh, wait a minute, something needs to be fixed. Something needs to be corrected. Definitely, I need to address something. Yes. So I look back and think I would do that differently now that I've had more kids and read a lot more report cards. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, let's say as a mom first, do you have any experiences that are similar?
I sure do. Yeah. I think as a mother and as a parent, we can recognize that we have had different ways of looking at the report. And for me, I too acknowledge that I could have done things better. And in fact, I know in junior school, our junior school teachers place so much effort into into their comments.
Yeah.
So as a mother, I would look first of all for the actual grades, not really reading the actual comments. So I acknowledge that, and I do apologize to the junior school teachers.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a natural part of parenting,
right?
And I think acknowledging that and being kind to ourselves, that as parents, there are always things that we're learning, and our goal is to continue to see how we can improve with the focus of supporting our children in this thing called the learning journey.
Right.
So when I think about the report card, and then perhaps what is the goal for report cards for parents, I would say that it is a tool to come alongside and support our children to develop and nurture them in their God-given gifts, and then also I like to think of it in a 4-part framework. And so it is a roadmap. So physically, the report is a roadmap. It's a tangible way for parents to see and evaluate where are the strengths and celebrate that. I love that you said, I forgot to celebrate. And so this is something that we as parents can also remember. It's a way to celebrate all circumstances. And then using that report card physically to see not just strengths, but weaknesses. And with those weaknesses in terms of trends, they give us an area to improve, which brings me to mentor. This is where we need to have a mindset of how can we support the children to improve. And I think that's actually a very, very important one. And then spiritual is where we layer our armor. I think as parents, we want to be well prepared. And I think having that spiritual grounding where there's truth, that our children have been created in God's image, and therefore with the ability to reason, to create, to think. And so we can encourage them that, it is on God's timing, not our timing, that they bloom and flourish. And I take that quote from Mr. Greg. And so he was very wise, and I'm so thankful, and that quote has stuck with me. And then I think about a social relationship. It's a relationship that we have with our children, and a beautiful way that we can come alongside and create a wonderful opportunity where our children can look back at their formative years, at their education learning journey, and see this as a positive thing.
Right. Yeah, I like that. And I think when you emphasize the relationship, then, like you're saying, you see it as a tool as opposed to an end in itself, where, your kid has to perform and then they come home and they might be a little bit afraid to hand you the document, or in our case, they know you can read it online, but there's a bit of fear associated with it. And I think sometimes where we err is forgetting what is unique about our kids, and also kind of thinking that, okay, well, this is a leveling ground. So your kid is in math in this grade and my kid is in math in this grade. So let's compare. Let's see how my kid compares to your kid. And it's a natural tendency that we have as parents to either compare our kids with their peers, or sometimes when we have multiple children, we have a memory of, child number 1 excelled in whatever subject. So when child number 2 comes along, we think, wait, what went wrong? And that's something I think we as a family learned too, is the idea that we don't want to use report cards as a way of comparing, even though our impulse is to compare. We make a really big effort not to vocalize or verbalize those comparisons. We might notice. It's impossible not to notice, but it's kind of this idea that, well, when, my first and my second and my third child all come home with report cards, we're going to make sure that the messaging that is in front of everybody is uplifting to all. And so I guess one of our rules is that we actually didn't let our kids read each other's report cards.
Yes.
Which at first seemed a little odd, but we said, well, look, if you want to show your brother your report card, that's fine. But you shouldn't be just assuming that you have the right to know that information, because for some kids, that's personal. They might feel upset about one particular mark, and they don't want to be told, well, I'm way better at science than you are, or whatever. So how do you think we as parents can build the kind of response to report cards that avoids comparison? How do we get beyond that?
That's a really good question. And I think, first of all, it's being prepared emotionally. And so I think both husband and wife need to be together on this one. And so I think emotionally preparing yourself so that you are in a place where, the spirit of grace is going to permeate that space. I think that's an anointed space that needs to be prayed over. And so I think families can work together, parents can work together. When is the best time to talk about reports? And like you, I also see that as a very vulnerable stage with children.
Can be.
And so I know that with my 3 children, they prefer to do this one-on-one. And so I think parents, you are a very good gauge of your children. And so I would default perhaps to having that one-on-one conversation. You're in a good space. It could be that for you it works best after dinner, or maybe after family worship or during family worship. Again, because family worship is with everyone, you might want to wait. And in our case, we always found it was around about bedtime. And so I guess this is when the children are most relaxed. And so this was when they were most receptive to looking at the report cards. And I think once you've gone through that emotional, you're setting your hearts, you're in unison together. This is when you can actually look at the reports and ask good questions, open-ended questions, where you have a spirit of, I want to encourage, but I also want to see how I can partner with my child and with the school, because this is a relationship journey where it's not just the parent and the child. It's also the school and the teachers as well. And so this is where the report allows you to look at patterns. And so there are specific things that parents can do in looking at the report, asking good open-ended questions, celebrating, first of all. Don't forget to celebrate, right? And say, hey, good job. I noticed that you've got an E for exceeding in the effort that you've placed in the subject. So you want to look and be intentional about looking at the good things. Just like we say, there is blessing in all circumstances. We too see blessing in the report. And so if we come at it from that mindset, we are thankful that we have the opportunity to look at areas of possible weakness and see them as opportunities to support the child to develop and grow. And so after these questions, you wait patiently for your child to respond. Again, this is where you really need the Holy Spirit to work in you, to listen empathetically. And again, without the natural impulse, well, why is it like this? Don't you know that your sibling, so you're trying to slice through potential negative situations, or just that spirit of comparison, I think, which is not helpful to anybody. And so conversations can quickly go south if it goes down that track. And so I think once the child responds, you're in a really good position to look for solutions together, and the solutions could be let's ask the teacher for some ways that we can better support you in this area.
Yeah.
Again, it's a partnership. And as you had started the conversation with prayer, you want to finish off with prayer and encourage your child. So I think those are just some principles that parents can use when talking about reports.
Yeah, I think that's great because you've touched on the importance of it being a relationship, which I think if it doesn't start that way, then there can be a lot of fear and anxiety in our kids. And what you're communicating is that actually we set the tone. And I think sometimes as parents, we get caught off guard because we haven't done it yet. We haven't done it before. And so maybe we start along a path and the pattern we realize, actually, this isn't really healthy.
Right.
There's freedom in recognizing that we can start over and we can say, actually, I don't really like how I did that. Let's try a different method. And I love how you kind of described something that's very private, kind of intimate, and a lot more listening, not just speaking, so that you are hearing from your child. If there are areas that where they feel discouraged or disappointed, you give them the space to express it in a way that they're not embarrassed or ashamed or fearful. And I would say in my memory, there were 3 years when my husband and I were dorm parents, and I had never realized just how much anxiety could surround the report card day in particular, but the season. And it was tangible. We would walk in because we would do chapel once a week on Wednesday. And it just so happened that Wednesday was always a report card day. And so you could tell, you could feel it in the air. You'd walk in and there were kids who were deeply disappointed with themselves. There were kids who were terrified because they knew their dad was going to call and be upset. There were kids that we'd talk to and they'd say, my mom is texting me, but I'm just ignoring her because I don't want to answer her questions. And that was an eye-opener for me, realizing just how much power we have as parents have. And I don't even know that those parents necessarily realize that this had become such an anxiety-producing experience. And so I wonder, I like how you worded the way of addressing it with kids. But what about parents who are just not in that habit yet? So how do we go from report cards are a big deal to, this is just part of your journey? How do we shift our mindset and how do we create a response to a report card that doesn't immediately cause our child to be afraid of us? How do we do that?
Yes. I think it's important to recognize that anxiety is real. I mean, I teach English as well. Yeah. And I've noticed that come the end of the term or before report cards, whether real or not, my perception is there is a little bit of anxiety within my students. They know that reports are about to be published. Yeah. And so it does, and having had experience with students who are so anxious that they do really well. But then I just feel it's a missed opportunity with parents, because as parents, I know that our parents love our children. Yeah. I know that. So that is something to be, to be joyful, and we rejoice in that. And sometimes we just need to have a little bit of help in that area. Yeah. And so knowing that our children are already very anxious, we don't want to add to that anxiety already. And so this was something I had fallen into that trap myself as a parent, when one of my children had said, Mum, I don't know whether you realize, but you come across as being so worried. So it makes me feel worried even more. So I have had to really check my spirit and the tone that I come into that conversation and into that space. So I think it's a really important acknowledgement as well. And I think also as parents, it's an acknowledgement that nobody is perfect. Yeah. And if we know that nobody is perfect, we are all a work in progress.
True.
And our children, therefore, are a work in progress as well. And so we are, are there to be their biggest support cheerleaders. If we can think of, I just want you to be happy. As opposed to, I need you to have a 7. I think that's a different kind of a conversation, because at the end of the day, you as a parent want a well-adjusted, happy child. And so I think those kinds of conversations will change when you realize that, what is it that is making you feel anxious? Is it because you want your child to get to this university or its future prospects? I find that conversations are so much more meaningful and so much more honoring to the child when you actually bring it to, what is it that I can do to support you? How can we encourage you in these areas that I can see that, there's been a dip in that particular subject. And so you are there to cheer them on, encourage them, and provide some specific ways to support them. Again, checking your spirit, that it's not a critical spirit. And then also knowing that we're about redemption. So as parents, we want to offer grace. Because we too have received grace. A second chance. So it could be that we just need to say, hey, I didn't get it all right. I remember what it was like. And of course, I want you to do better than me, but I'm going to share that I understand. And so I think you'll have, life-giving conversations with your child so that they end up not dreading that moment. Instead, they see that as a relief. Actually, my parent has got my back. My parent
is on my side.
And my parent is on my side.
I like how you talked about basically asking the question, or saying, what I want for you is that you're happy, as opposed to what I need from you is to perform. And sometimes that's not sometimes, I think that's the core of it, that if we're looking at our child, and their development and their growth and their character, and not just their numeric achievement on a piece of paper, then there's freedom. They don't have that tension. They don't have that pressure anymore. It's more like we're on the same team. We're working towards the same goals, and it's your growth. It's your development. This report card is one moment in time. It reflects, accurately what you have accomplished in these areas right now, but it doesn't mean, it's not limiting your possibilities for the future. It doesn't even necessarily show what you're capable of. It just shows what you have accomplished here and now. And so, using words that kind of reduce pressure and cause them to sort of relax and feel that they're not required to perform, it would make a big difference. I wonder about, you talked a little about faith or redemption. So let's say, what would be the difference, do you think, for a Christian parent, somebody who really wants to honor God in looking at a report card, versus somebody who doesn't have a faith, doesn't have that framework for their life? Because, you're both looking at achievements. Let's say the child is actually underperforming in all areas. Let's say it's a report card that, to any outsider looking in, it's just not a great one. It's not a high achieving student. What would be the difference between a Christian parent responding and finding ways to encourage their child based on that achievement?
Yes.
How do you do that?
First and foremost, I think it's acknowledging as Christian parents that our identity does not come from our grades. And I think that's something that I've really tried to emphasize with our MYP parents. And I think for any parent, that identity does not come from grades or from performance. And so I think straight away that's so liberating. That's so liberating. And yet at the same time, there is truth, that truth, and that you've been created in God's image. if you've been created in God's image, you have the ability to think, to reason, to create. And again, as I had mentioned in my earlier, quote from Mr. Greg, it's not, your child's development is not on your timing, it's on God's timing.
Right. Yeah.
So, the good work that he has started is not yet finished.
Yeah.
It's progress. It's ongoing progress. And I think it's also looking at your child through God's lens.
Yeah.
So if it's through God's lens as a Christian parent, you're wanting to intentionally look at blessings. So the blessing of, hey, you have done well in these other life skill areas.
Yeah.
So then you've got in the report, you've got attitudinal measures, if you like. So organization and management, their effort, their participation, level of respect. I mean, these are just some soft measures, if you like, of how your child is developing as a person. So we want to look at the holistic approach. The holistic development of your child is so important because, as you had said earlier, you're not just a grade.
Right.
So I think it's really important that I think, that Christian parents do recognize, the identity in Christ, the stewardship of gifts. But I think there is common grace with all parents, both Christian and non-Christian, where you want the best for your child.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so knowing that you want the best for your child, you're naturally going to want to know, well, if I want the best for my child, then that best means it's not just the academic grade.
Yeah.
I want a child, I'm sure you too, who is kind. Someone who is kind is someone that you want on your team.
Right.
As opposed to someone who is very bright, but not the nicest person and individual.
Right.
You want someone who's empathetic. You want someone who is able to, to be a team player. And so being a team player means it's not about self. You're going to play your part as much as possible. So these are all good skills that both Christian and non-Christian parents alike can celebrate. That's God's common grace to all.
Yes.
And so then you are intentionally looking and having meaningful conversations about things outside of the classroom. What gives you joy? It could be athletics. Celebrate that. Because some people shine in the athletic arena. And I think there are so many good things that we can take from that space where they get to know how to work with others, to be resilient, to be able to come back from disappointment. And disappointment is a big thing. And so, human beings, we will continuously be disappointed, but to know how to fail well is a part of being resilient.
Absolutely.
So maybe just a few of those things.
No, I think that's wonderful because now what you're doing is you're putting the report card in the bigger picture and reminding us as parents that if we zone in on the report card too much, we run the danger of thinking that is the whole, that's representing the whole of my child. And that's impossible, right? So
absolutely.
I think you're spot on in terms of looking for where God has given gifts to our kids and pointing those out, acknowledging them, recognizing that we do want our kids to be well balanced. We want them to have all sorts of skills in life that are not necessarily going to show up on the report card, but that are going to make them an excellent employee and somebody that's going to make a great husband and wife or husband or wife one day. And so, I think you're right that we have the opportunity, if our children are not academically strong, those are still moments for us to point out, yes, maybe you feel disappointed, and I understand that maybe you work harder than some of your friends who are achieving higher marks, and yet the work you're putting in isn't wasted because you're building a character and a resilience that when you go to the workplace, your friends who didn't have to work hard, they don't have that skill yet. And so, you have grown and you have matured in ways that this will benefit you in the future. Of course, for a kid, it still feels like, yeah, but I'm not measuring up. And I think we as parents have the opportunity to speak life and speak truth in a way that our kids, even if the rest of the world makes them feel that they're unworthy or they haven't met the expectation, they haven't lived up. If we can be the ones to say, I see how hard you worked. I know that you might feel disappointed with this, but I'm proud of you. And you are going to succeed. I think there's so much power in those words, and there's so much that we can do to help them to see that their identity is not tied to their marks. I mean, and I think here in Asia, that's an even harder message to get across, because in a good way, there's a great emphasis on academic achievement. But the flip side is that sometimes we think that that's what defines who we are. And as a Christian, of course, that's not the whole picture. So I like how you brought that back into the story of responding to the report card. I wonder about anything that you have experienced that you think, I would definitely avoid this kind of a response. So I can think of instances where maybe privileges have been removed based on, not living up. And yet maybe in some cases there are students who work really hard and what comes out on the paper isn't actually reflecting their effort. So what would you say to the kinds of punitive or reactive responses? When would it be appropriate? When could it be beneficial or motivating? And when should we avoid it?
Yes. Great question, Natalie. So I believe this is the partnership coming in, and knowing, and we've already talked about our goal that we want for our children. I think we want to be able to understand the areas of weakness. And if those areas of weakness are a passion, so this is when we want to have a conversation and look at the feedback that teachers have provided. And so you might find that there might be some patterns that you may have not picked up, that your child seems to be always late or submitting incomplete work. And so those are, again, that's a positive thing. Because now you have something to work with. So those are good conversations to have. How are we using our time? How are you studying? Where are you studying? Can you tell me where you're studying? Are you studying how? Do you have because we have an era of the digital devices, right? And so this is a conversation that we need to hold with our children. So this is where we come in and ask, when you're studying, is it truly just focusing in on the subject or are you distracted? And so I think those are really important and also meaningful conversations that we can help our child. So I think conversations are important. Partnership with the teachers, understanding the report, looking at the report, and knowing how your child works. And so this is where you can be not just a big cheerleader, but you can be a strategic cheerleader as well.
And you're emphasizing now the idea of skills, not just the achievement level. So, maybe the child can achieve fine, but they're still tardy and they're getting their work done, or there are patterns that need to grow, that need to develop. And I think if we can see report cards as something that we use as a tool that actually helps our children to grow as learners, then it's not, they will start to understand that, life is about me gaining skills and growing in my ability to learn, to develop, to become a more mature individual. So learning how to manage my time. Those are, every kid needs to learn that, right? Even adults have to still figure that out.
Absolutely.
And so I think you're right. If the conversation can then go veer away from, why did you get this or not that? Or let's aim for A's, not B's, that's kind of just on paper, and it doesn't really address the child, their character, their development, and their future, really.
Absolutely.
Because you could have a child who, gets all 7s or all A's, who really is thoroughly depressed and also incredibly anxious and has no sense of self-worth.
Yes.
And then on paper, you could boast that your kid is doing awesome, but really it's at the cost. It's a great cost to a child and also our relationship, because, at the end of the day, our kids they're going to get out of school one day and we're going to want to have a good relationship with them.
Absolutely.
So we don't want report cards to be this sticking point or this area where they don't want to talk to us and we're stressed about talking to them because we have expectations up here and they're only reaching here, So I think you're right that we need to strike a balance where we have expectations and goals, but in the end, we see it as part of the whole, part of the growth and development. And I was reading a quote that said that education is really more about the becoming than about the achieving. And I think if we can communicate that to our kids, then the burden and the weight of having to perform for our parents' approval or for the approval of our neighbors and our teachers and whoever it is that we want to impress, the burden is gone. Because,
isn't that liberating though? It's so liberating to have that mindset, and so I think so biblical as well, in the sense that we exist for God's glory, and we are a work in progress, and to become, all of us are becoming. We never fully arrive. Right? And so I think that that's a beautiful thing, that parents can partner with the school. Teachers are here. We want to partner, and we desire, and we've seen beautiful partnerships, and it's beautiful when there's harmony and unity in that area, where we want to see children truly flourish. Okay, that's flourishing is what we want.
We do.
Right?
We do.
And so I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. We want well-adjusted children. We want children who, as you say, when they go beyond our doors, we're no longer there. But we pray and hope that they have been covered by these life-giving pieces of advice, your identity is not in your grades. That you've been created in God's image. That you can think as you inquire, as you wrestle with ideas, you have the ability to do that. And then using that knowledge and applying that correctly is wisdom. And asking for God's wisdom and discernment, and to have spiritual eyes to see Him at work, I think is beautiful. So I think parents have a beautiful opportunity to come in and for their children to look back at reports and not see that as an anxiety-ridden moment, but to see that as truly liberating. And I think you will find that relationships will be even more God-honoring. We learn from our mistakes.
Do we ever? And I think you're right. If we keep the focus or our desire as being that our children will come to know Christ, to know and love Him, then again, the perspective changes. So with that as a goal in mind, when we look at a report card, we can talk about the one perfect man who, I don't know what his report card would look like, but we know in all respects he was perfect. And because he was perfect, we don't have to keep striving all the time. And so there is this peace and this assurance that we rest secure in Him, and that we aim for high achievement. We want to use all of our gifts to God's glory. But in the end, we know that whatever we achieve isn't going to make us more or less loved by God, because that identity of ours is secure. So I love hearing you talk about your journey as a parent and also as a teacher, and just hearing your heart for kids and how we can use report cards to really zone in on what matters most.
Yes.
And to continue to build the kind of healthy relationship that helps them
Yes.
to grow up to be young adults who know who they are and aren't just comparing themselves to the rest of the world, but see that their growth is what matters most. So, yeah.
That's life-giving, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today. A real blessing to hear your thoughts and to talk together about how we can use report cards in redeeming ways in our kids' lives.
And relational too.
Yeah.
So redemptively and relationally.
Yeah.
Reports are life-giving.
Yeah.
And so positive. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I've really appreciated it. And I really do pray that our parents will be able to look at this not as a way to be judged, but as a way to liberate your relationship with your children. Yeah.
Amen. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on Rooted Parenting, where I'm here to help you to honor God as a parent and to raise your kids to know and to love Jesus. If you enjoyed the podcast, we'd love it if you would subscribe. Please also share with a friend. We're here to inspire, to equip, and to encourage parents. And you can find the podcast on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, and on Spotify. On the next episode, I'm going to be talking with my daughter, Layla Mann, and I'm really excited about it. So please join us.